What story are you telling? Whether you're intentional about it or not, you have an audience and they think in story. The Doug Thompson podcast features diverse storytellers sharing their practical tips for telling the story they need others to envision and trust in order to take a new action. Here's your host, Doug Thompson.
This episode of the Doug Thompson podcast was recorded from a live stream. The interview is here in its entirety. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Doug Thompson podcast. I am honored to have a multi-talented, doesn't even begin to describe sort of my guest, Deborah Johnson. Deborah, how you doing?
I am doing great. Love being here. I love the podcast format or the streaming format. It's so much fun. You can just have so much reach everywhere. So I love it.
You know, Seth Godin talks about sort of breaking down the barriers to publishing and stuff and all that. He's somebody I listen to a lot, and it really it puts things at your hands that years ago you would have had to have an you've done this for a couple of years, getting an agent, getting publicists, and getting all these other things that were roadblocks to people sort of sharing their ideas and stuff before. How's all that sort of enabled you to expand your reach and all? Again, you're a musician, you're a singer. Publisher, director. I think if I look down the dictionary of jobs, you got like the top 15.
I just love what I do. I've been doing it for a long time. And I come from doing my graduate work to where I did my master's thesis I did a concert, a mini concert and a mini thesis. And so all of the music, and it was on arranging and composition. And so we did that by hand. There was nothing, there was all black fingers. This is what we did. And we did snail mail. We did everything this way. So, with this generational, a lot of, you don't realize as you're coming up today, or even the, millennials and throughout there, which I love. But there's so much that you have at your fingertips, and it is growing technically, exponentially. Is that the right word? But it's multiplying really, really fast. So I think it really does open up a lot of opportunity, and not to get overwhelmed with it. Just I always say, add one little thing at a time.
Yeah, it's the whale syndrome or the elephant syndrome where you try to eat the whole thing at once. It's overwhelming when you think about it. But just take that one step. And I wonder how many. Since we sort of grew up with different technology, we had to learn technology, and we're still learning technology. So it sort of makes us, we don't assume things. We remember the old days. And how do you think that has actually blocked some people from sort of continuing the creation and stuff like that? Or, what's the challenges they have to overcome from that?
Well, I really do think it does block some people because there's a fear, and it really relates to fear in general of what people are afraid of. And I think, I could do the same thing, but I've grown up not grown up, but especially in my career as an
we refuse to
entrepreneur.
grow up. I refuse to grow up.
But, I've had a small music production studio. So if I didn't learn how to do it, and if I didn't experiment and spend 2 or 3 hours being stuck on a particular cable and find out a solution, I wouldn't be able to produce the song. And so there's a certain amount of this to where you feel like, you got to pay your dues a little bit in all of these areas and figure it out. And there are still things that happen. Even I'm pretty much a techie now. But I'm not an expert. I hire people. I hire a production. Now I hire studios, but I can do the pre-production. There's people that do this all the time. Yeah. And those are the people I bring on, but you can't let that fear, figure out exactly what you need. First of all, you don't have to overwhelm yourself. Just think, if I take one little step, how can I improve in this little area, and learn enough about it that you can even hire it out.
Yeah. And I think that's the key there is learning. Spend more time in the area that's your strengths and your expertise and stuff on that, and know enough to hire the right people to do the other things that's their area of expertise. Right. It's fine. For me, it's letting go, because I like the production. I like the other stuff going through the podcast. I'm a bit of a nerd as it is, but I have come to realize, like, I used to build my own PCs and I used to do these other things, but now I will buy them fully assembled because that used to take hours of my life. But it's focusing on what's important. And you talk about on your tagline, you got build a sustainable business at halftime. So I looked, I said, okay, this is a football game going on. What's the score? But tell us a little bit about that, because I think it ties directly into sort of how we've been able to transition our careers.
Right. At mid-career, halftime of life, officially, if you look on the internet, which is, all of our immediate source of expertise,
Authority,
right? The
right?
internet. Yeah, right. But they do label halftime officially after the age of 40, which comes very, very soon. I think it's a little bit 45-ish, 50-ish, especially as women go through raising families, maybe a little later. But really that mid-career or halftime of life, there's a lot of decisions that you make. Many people come to those times of life and think, I've been putting off something that I've wanted to do for a very long time. And should I do it? And I say, yes, but start it very, very small. Keep doing what you're doing and start the education process, even as a side business, and start developing some of those dreams. Because, there's one of the top regrets that people have upon dying. And I'm just reading that great book right now. It's the 5 top regrets of people that are dying, which sounds so morbid,
Yeah.
but it's an actual fascinating book. And the number one is that they never pursued their dreams. And this is from the author that has spent hundreds and hundreds of people that's what she does.
Mhm.
And that's the number one that people look back. And there's other reasons, of course, not spending, time with the family or working too hard and those things. But the number one is that they never pursued really what they dreamed to be able to do. And for some people, that might be, I've really wanted to pursue some of my music or some of my art. And of course, I've spent a lot of my time doing that. But that might be part of that, that you could develop a little bit of that on that side. But I think that's a real crucial time of life. And this was really brought to the forefront with our recent shutdowns, because people all of a sudden, when they are working remotely or they had this fear of, I might just lose everything. Oh, well, maybe I can start brand new. And so there's all of these startups and feeling like, and those are great times when we look back in history. I wrote I did a podcast on that same thing. What happens during those decades that we feel like we've got such problems? A lot of innovation, a lot of people are, this is when the entrepreneurs really shine.
Mm-hmm.
That was a long answer.
No. That's a great answer, though, because it's sort of a lot of us won't move. It gets back to sort of our subconscious and being comfortable, and we have responsibilities, as you mentioned, that either raising children or providing for the family or something, and the risk to that sort of coming, coming to an end is a problem, right? That's job number one for me, is providing for the family and doing that, and something like what just happened. It forces you have to make a decision. Then a lot of times, they couldn't do the same old stuff, so now I have to do this, and so maybe that was impetus to start these things. That's the kindling to the fire, I think, to a lot of this.
Right. I think you're exactly right. I mean, it's taken people, they're living in a different area now, thinking, why didn't I do this years ago?
Mm-hmm.
And I was, working so hard and spending so much time in traffic and doing all of that. And all of a sudden I can work remotely. We have a son that's an attorney, and they told him, you can work remotely. We're going to do it. We'll reevaluate after 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
But he's been this whole time working remotely. And he says, I can get people on the phone now. He's doing he's doing everything. And so he can actually live anywhere. So it has freed a lot of people. Now, I think there's a real benefit to having people together too in some companies, but it's made a lot of people think twice about what they really, really want to do and what sort of lifestyle they would like as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And to your point about the in-person type stuff, especially for speakers like us, I won't speak for you, but I know for me, I've been to a couple of conferences and been able to do some stuff later where you get to actually shake somebody's or fist bump or whatever the appropriate protocol is at the time. But you get to exchange
changes
that,
every day.
Yeah, you get to exchange that vibe, right? So there's a difference. And I watched your trailer for your new keynote that was coming on. And there's definitely a connection that comes on between you and the audience. You can't see it. I wish there was some spectral glasses you could sort of see the aura going around. I'm sure it exists. But I feel that, and it to me it gets so much more empowering, invigorating to make that connection than it is even through video. Now, video's good as opposed to
Right.
simply a phone call, but it still can't replace that in person piece for those
Oh,
things.
you are so right. And I'm an entertainer. I call myself more a performer
Hmm.
than an entertainer because I really see some amazing entertainers. But there is a connection when you feel like you've connected with that audience and you can see their eyes and you
Hmm.
can see them right there. And there is, and that space, you
Yeah,
have the space.
yeah.
And we've been in this little box and it's hard, to have that movement. And what I love to do, Doug, is I love to inspire. If I can inspire and encourage you to keep going in your life, I will have done my job. I've taught privately since I was the age of 13. And I've taught music, of course, because that's how I put myself even through school, piano and voice. But it's not just the material and the theory.
Hmm.
It's inspiring someone to learn for themselves.
Hmm.
And this is why I've had the students go on and do extremely well. I always tell them, you need to surpass me, which very few do, but it's what they can do with just that inspiration
Hmm.
and that drive. And if you can help develop that in somebody, I will have done my job. You can get the information almost anywhere, but what you need to link yourself up with are those people that can inspire you and move you forward.
Yeah, that's so true. I look at it, my goal of any time I talk or interact with somebody, be it mentoring or coaching or something, is that, short term that they leave that session or whatever thinking, in a better place, right? The time has been
Right.
well spent. But ideally, I like to give them the tools, sort of like you're talking about, and go watch them do things. Some of the things I can't do, I could never do because I'm not them, one, but they can
Right.
take those tools and you can sort of see how they blossom and start developing on your own. How do
Right.
you, because I did coaching at 13. I was just like, wow, teaching and stuff. How do you use stories in your coaching and throughout your stuff with that? How do you use that as a vehicle to help accomplish what you just talked about?
Stories. I have linked onto stories more and more and seen how important they are because I was kind of raised with that as teaching. You get into the educator and just the content. But what I've found with stories is there's a real relationship then that's a connection that people can put you in those characters. And I started to realize this more and more when I was writing musicals, which is another
Hmm.
thing I've done. It's a bad habit, I say. Not really, but I mean, it's a lot of work. I did not realize
I've
what I
been
was
in a
getting
few
into, but
musicals. I can't imagine writing it, trying to coordinate all that stuff.
it was, well, and it wasn't just writing it, it was producing it.
Right.
Because then I thought, oh, people are just going to do it. Oh, no. Oh, no. But in realizing how an actor needs a character, they need that story. And if all of the parts of that, even the music and everything, don't move that story forward, you need to be able to cut it. And that's really, really tough as an artist. But I really realized how important that story is. And just this recent book that I wrote, which is an allegory, I wrote a story because, and it was most like writing the script of a musical of anything that I've written. When people ask, oh, what have you written before? Kind of like this. Well, it was the characters,
Mhm.
and it's what people are identifying with are the characters. And it was helpful for me in my own life. I usually live through most anything I write, believe me, as a writer, as a speaker, performer. You live through it. And I've talked to ministers, they live through those. When they're talking about tough times,
Yeah.
they've lived through it. I mean, there's usually part of this that we speak from that experience and from that heart. And so those stories, I think, Doug, speaks to the heart, and it speaks to what people, their soul inside, thinking, I can identify with that character.
Mhm.
Maybe it's not the main one, it might be a side character.
Yeah. So I living through it, that gives you the expertise and experience and authority to go ahead and present or coach on what it is you're talking about. I have lived through that too. Like some of your talk about that inner voice and just the fear and the, I'm not good enough. I can't do this. I'm too old. All the whatever's right. I'm too this or too that. That when I was doing my TED talk, preparing for that, boy, I was paralyzed for that. And I actually incorporated that into my TED talk when I talked about the storytelling. It's the story we tell ourselves. So, it does ring true, because when you live it, then you can sort of, here's how I got through it. Here's some things that to be aware of, and then how do you share that with other people? I think you do that a lot, be it through a musical or a book or anything, singing songs. How does storytelling in a song, because this sort of ties in the musical piece of it, because if the music doesn't match the what's going on in front of the story, how do you sort of marry those two?
It depends on what music. Now, as a writer, it's a little bit different. When I'm
Mm-hmm.
singing my songs, that's
Mm-hmm.
different
Mm-hmm.
than when I'm performing The Phantom, which I've done. And I'm hitting those money notes, and I'm,
Mm-hmm.
Christine in that nice white dress on a stage, or
Yeah.
else I'm playing Rhapsody in Blue. I am, performing the music according to what the artist and the writer has written.
Mm-hmm.
And so being true to those and creating that, then you become more of an actress
Mm-hmm.
and create that character. On a stage. So some of those stories, I'm just looking to bring enjoyment to people, and those are some of their favorite songs. It's pretty amazing
Mm-hmm.
that that's lasted through the years, but they're just classics.
Mm-hmm.
They're becoming classics of that sort of music, that type of music, from the Gershwins to the Andrew Lloyd Webbers, and
Mm-hmm.
that was the biggest solo shows that I've done. I've done another variety show with double pianos and all of that, but the type of music you get into those, um, just the doing the songs justice, whether I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing a Disney medley,
Mm-hmm.
okay, and that's another area to where you can envision, people are envisioning the story, they're hearing that a whole new world, and they're on the magic carpet,
Mm-hmm.
and or Beauty and the Beast, and they're, I remember going into that castle, and they remember. And I
Mm-hmm.
just did an engagement. I've worked for Disney for years, but they create playing for those, or performing for people. It just brings back some of those beautiful memories
Mm-hmm.
of the movies or the
Mm-hmm.
stories. Definitely.
No, because there's this tie I can bring, like the high school or wherever you hear a song, and it's an anchor that brings you back to a memory. Unlike a lot of our memories, they don't have any anchors. They're sort of adrift at sea somewhere, and I'll stumble across them when I least expect it. But I'm a big fan of, like, people that take classical things and put a modern spin on, like Trans-Siberian Orchestra with they put
Right.
rock to these classic musics, or two cellos. Those guys have such a great, playing, or Bond, or these other things that really put sort of a more modern and things spin on
Mhm.
older stuff. And do you find that sort of hard to accept? I mean, because you sort of grew up with these other things and all that. How do you feel about that? About sort of
I
modernizing or taking it to another level.
I love it.
Yeah.
I did it. One of the first albums I put out, well, a group, done a number of
Hmm.
albums, a group of albums I put out. It's called Classical Spice,
Hmm.
and it was a hooked on classics with piano, and I used a lot of samples, what was
Hmm.
called, and that was another technical thing that I had to learn how to use a sampler.
Yeah.
I would buy this equipment and then think, okay, I'll learn how to use it.
Yeah.
Not that easy. And then with the double piano, we did something called the Classics Rock.
Hmm.
Great album, by the way. But took everything from Shostakovich to Kabalevsky to, we did a lot of Bach, and we did a lot of those for Elise.
Hmm.
A lot of those songs in a modern way. And
Hmm.
my piano partner, or piano pal, as I call him, Waylon Picard, he had more of a true jazz emphasis. So we were able to put a little bit of that in. And of course, I love anything with a rock beat. So we were able to put in, just some great arrangements with that. So
Hmm.
I think it's wonderful. I even sent it a
Hmm.
copy, and she sent me the sweetest note back. She's just not here anymore. She's passed along. But my classical piano teacher that I had from high school, and she was the first woman concert pianist to go into communist Russia. And
Wow.
she's amazing woman. She always wore black, always wore her hair on top of her head. She was just intimidating because I was kind of small, but she was an amazing teacher. I sent her a copy of this because I thought, oh, she's going to roll over,
Yeah.
thinking, oh my gosh. She really appreciated the artistry in
Yeah.
back. And what it does is it opens up a whole new audience for some of your work.
Yeah, it does. And it sort of puts, in bringing more people in, the challenge, some of those people that are still in the first half resist that, right? It's sacrilegious, or because I've been in some groups, concert societies and stuff that have sort of frowned on that, but they yet complain that their patronage was dying because they're all the older ones. It's like you've got a whole audience out here if you approach it a little bit differently and embrace something that's a little new technology.
Right.
Somebody's different spin on it, because it's really, I think it's an homage back to the original artist and sort of bringing it into the modern form. Because I've also found that I go back and listen to the original songs and have a different appreciation for it, back then.
Right, definitely. And I think it just opens up, and I love the trans-American or the orchestras and the Siberian orchestra. I was getting the Americans and the Siberian.
It's Christmas time.
But I just absolutely love their music, and it's upbeat, it's uplifting.
Yeah.
And you find a lot of this. The interesting thing to me is that where somebody may be in a certain, all them for is a certain style of music. And then they show up at a ball game or the Superbowl and sing the national anthem. And you're thinking, I never knew they could do that. I never knew they had that range. They actually can sing.
Yeah.
Well, of course, a lot of them have that background. And so we tend to discount that. And it's a very important part of education, and not just going for, singing 5 notes and, this little, repetitive melody that may be catchy, but what else can you do?
Yeah.
So it just expands.
I watched my family and I like watching The Masked Singer, which gives them sort of that time. You can't see them, and yet they show sides of them that you didn't know that they had, and they put on some really good performances. So how do you, in your new book that came out, so you talk about it's allegory. Allegory.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yes, I know.
I was saying analogy. I got analogies on my head because I use those all day in work trying to relate them to other people. So tell us about sort of what started that. What was the story behind that, and the character? Sort of give us a little rundown on that.
Yeah, it was really fun. I just happened to have a copy. If you're watching this, of course, the streaming, you can see it. But I started it. I start with ideas always, and I always have a bank of ideas. And the start of the story came when I looked at a picture, and I say this in the audio book. I added a bonus chapter to it on how I even created the book, which is actually quite interesting. But I saw this picture of this amazing place by this beautiful like lake or water body of water, and it just looks so idealistic, and someplace that you could go and just spend about a month and just write, and just create. And then I thought, nobody would do that today because they wouldn't have the time, or wouldn't take the time, or they wouldn't have the attention span to be able to do it. They'd need to be off, doing something else. So I wrote that idea. That was the idea factory. I wrote it on an index card. And then I started gathering more ideas. That was kind of the name of the book at first. I thought it was going to be the idea factory, and all the things in it, and how you couldn't find anybody in it. And then I thought, oh, I know why they're not there. They're at the social media circus. And so then that whole thing developed with Friendland and Bluebird and Connector and all of those that are very similar to what we have today.
Right.
But people get caught up in this, and they get caught up on a roundabout, which is another area in the book. So I just kind of developed part of these, and then I thought, what am I going to do with this? It can't just be the idea factory. This needs to be a whole journey. And I had already trademarked a program that I have, the Hero Mountain. So I thought, oh, this needs to be the summit, the journey to Hero Mountain. And it's this is the beginning of her summit. So that's where I started then developing the characters. And the first character, the protagonist, is I didn't name her Mallory at first, which her name changes at the end to Andriette. Mallory means ill-fated. She becomes strong and courageous, very theatrical, right? But her first name as the muse was not good enough. I needed to make that character that she felt not good enough in almost everything that she was doing. And she needed to overcome that in many ways with the self-talk and with her journaling and all of that. So that was that sort of process. And it was probably, I mean, every book, I don't call myself a natural book writer. I mean, there's some people that, and I hire those people, editors, they're amazing.
Yes,
Just
yes, a good
wordsmiths,
editor.
they know how to do it. But I have to really work at this craft and work at cutting it down. Same thing with a musical script, and it's tough, but you really need to cut it down, and you tend to repeat yourself and do all of that. So it was, a process for me, but I worked with some great editors, wonderful editors that really helped me through, this process of making sure this whole journey. And of course, our protagonist, our main character, there's a guide, but he is nameless. He's just called the guide. So, but how important that is in our lives. There are many things that we need a guide for. I don't do a lot of private coaching. I do, more groups, or I do more speaking, but the guidance is very, very important.
Yeah. No, I love that, because it sounds like if I sort of give the synopsis of the story, you put some of your courseware and all the other stuff and gave it a persona where you sort of illustrated the path and the journey that people can be on to go to climb that summit.
And I actually did illustrate it. Because I knew we were live streaming today.
Cool.
I actually put together maps in the book. Now it's black and white in the book, but these are maps that I have: the journey to Hero Mountain, and then I have the social media circus. And so to me, they were a great visualization of what, where she went. Because we tend to be, as an artist, I'm very visual, and that's the way I've even memorized tons of music. 100-page scores of just, I'm very visual. I know where that next page is leading. So to me, that was really a fun part of the book.
It sounds really wonderful to giving a story, storyteller telling a story about somebody's story. It's pretty deep.
It's a story within a story. That's what an allegory is. Exactly. A lot of people have not heard that word.
I was going to have to go look that up after that, just to make sure I understood what that was. I have a pretty good vocabulary, but I like talking to people smarter than I am, because I learn something new every day. That's great. So, Deborah, how do people get a hold of you? What's the best way to get a hold of you? Besides buying it, we'll put that in the show notes where to get your book and things like that. But
well, I have a number of websites.
I would expect no less.
For speaking, it's Deborah Johnson Speaker, easy. And because there's millions of Deborah Johnsons, you'll never find me if you just look Deborah Johnson, Deborah Johnson Speaker. Goalsforyourlife.com. You can reach me there. I have my Hero Mountain Summit coming up. That's a 5-month virtual program. That's probably the most interaction that you'll get with me personally on that. That it's a virtual program to actually, I take you through the steps to Hero Mountain on that. And so Hero Mountain Summit, it's also available for small businesses and for their groups, because you can get the CE credits from it. Everyone will go to, I will guarantee you, the music first. DJ Works Music, because they allow to see all the music. I've got a ton of stuff on YouTube, a lot of albums, musicals, you can find them there. And it's just fun listening and hopefully encouraging some people.
It is. It ties me back to, again, things I've done in my past. And it's just really wonderful to hear something from such a powerful storyteller as you are in different facets of your life, and being able to tell those stories through acting and through acting. I guess you would tell a story, but through music and creating the musicals and the stuff that way. So Deborah, thanks a lot for spending time with us today. And I've learned something from this as well. And I will go out and learn what allegory. We're hitting the dictionary up as soon as we get done with this exercise my tech muscles. So Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you for the opportunity. I never take it for granted. Thank you.
Great. Thanks.